So welcome to the session, Understanding Your Learner, Why and How. We are very excited to have you here today. I'm very happy to see my colleagues, and also a special welcome to our new faculty. We have ARC fellows joining us today, and also the GPS fellows, so very welcome. We are excited that you are joining NYU Shanghai community. My name is Evgenia. I'm the director for the Center for Teaching and Learning, and I will be leading this session today. This is a topic which is very dear to me. I'm constantly learning about students, and I'm interested in the research of how individual differences affect academic performance and students' achievements of learning outcomes. And before we actually get going with today's plan, I would like to kick it off with engaging you a little bit. And I will show you a picture, a photo, and I would like you to imagine that you are an instructor facing this situation. So I want you to think about the emotions that you experience. I want you to think about students' emotions that you witness, and then we will do a quick polling. The polling will be anonymous. Please feel free just to share, what you see and how you feel about it, okay? It will make the whole experience more interesting. Okay, so here's the photo. 3 guiding questions. Just 30 seconds. Students' emotions, your emotions as an instructor standing in front of the students, and your potential response. So let's take a look at our responses, our collective responses here. So how do the students feel? I mean, we all have been in such situations as students, probably. So here you can see a range of emotions. Some think that students feel exhausted. Some feel that they feel bored, tired. Interestingly enough, the emotions are very different, because feeling bored and feeling tired, those are very different emotions, and probably the causes of emotions are very different as well. Disinterested, sleepy, good. So this is an interesting assessment of how we differently appraise what we see that is happening with the students. Let's move on to the next one. What are your feelings when you witness such an emotion as faculty, right? As an instructor? Stressed, anxious, annoyed, feeling, I guess, distracting. Okay, so based on this word cloud, we see that there are more kind of negative emotions, alarmed emotions. That have you observed a similar situation in your classroom? So in terms of the responses, try to rush through slides to a more interactive activity. First, give general reminder to pay attention and stay off devices. Get students to stand up and do a group stretch. It's a great idea. Call the student and ask a question. Oh, very nice, and so on. Focus. Okay, so this is actually very interesting. We can see that the emotions that we experience and the emotions that we recognize in students are quite diverse. And also the response to such situation is very different as well. I mean, I use this scenario to highlight how important it is to witness emotions and behaviors to ensure that actually students are engaged, because this is our goal in the classroom, right? We want our students every single lesson to achieve learning outcomes. When students are not engaged, it's great, and this is one way of doing this, right? Doing this in class. But in this session, something that we would like to focus in more detail is what can we do in advance, and what can we learn about students in advance to help us avoid such situations, and to ensure that every task we hold, every assignment we hold, we are leading each of our students towards the learning outcomes. In today's session, we will also look at what we already know about NYU Shanghai students, and how that may impact the teaching methods that we adopt and their academic performance. And finally, we will focus on some practical tools that you can adapt throughout the course that will help you assess who your students are as learner, and adapt your teaching methods towards this goal. So this is this session's plan, and I would like to move on with our first question: is why is it essential to know your students? I'm going to introduce a little bit of theory because I believe this framework will be important to help you understand what we will discuss further. And it's also very useful to apply it as you assess your own students. So all of us, when we plan the course, when we plan the task, whatever that is, where do we start? So we are starting with learning outcomes. Basically, where do we want all of our students to get? And then many of us use the backward design model, where based on the learning outcomes, based on plan B, we are thinking about what is that evidence that will show that students have achieved those learning outcomes, right? So we think about evidence, and then we think about, okay, what kind of assessments am I going to use in my course to highlight or to help me understand that students have achieved those learning outcomes. And once we have thought of that, we are thinking about, okay, then what am I going to do in the course? What teaching methods, what task am I going to use? Where is the student in this whole picture? At what time, at what point in time do you start thinking about your student and whether, what are some of the qualities or characteristics that I need to know to plan the course? From the beginning, you have to know the students to determine their learning outcomes. Could be possible, but usually we design the course because the course within the curriculum and the learning outcomes are kind of already, they are approved, they exist. Every year you might have very different students, so learning outcomes do not necessarily change much. I mean, that's a good point. You might want to do this for the task at the start to determine what goals are achievable. Oh, that's a good one. Okay. The point is that we don't do this frequently, actually. When we plan the course, we don't think about students that frequently. And this might be an important thing to keep in mind, right? Because we want all of them to be there, to be at the same finish line. At the same time, we know that the students come with different starting points. They arrive from different backgrounds, they have different knowledge, skills, experiences, whatever that is, you name it. There are multiple factors. And not only that, they also, as we deliver our teaching methods, right? Students will have a very different learning experiences because they have different goals, they have different cognitive characteristics. I'm not going to say that they have different learning styles. I will say that they have different learning habits that have been determined by their educational exposure. They may have different emotions about and self-efficacy. How do I feel about learnings? So all of these aspects, they will actually have a huge impact on whether or not students are achieving learning outcomes. I'm going to elaborate a little bit more. According to the learning theory, to arrive to the learning outcomes, it's important that the task is, or the challenge at any point in the course is level appropriate. Okay, there is a theory by Lev Vygotsky and also the optimal learning experience by Csikszentmihalyi that suggest that the level of challenge of the task should be skill appropriate, which means that we need to know students' level of skills, right? And hence, we need to be able to recognize students' prior knowledge, their abilities, and things like this. So basically, level appropriateness or task appropriateness or learning outcome appropriateness is not one size fits all approach. Is it enough to, even if I'm able to adjust the level of challenge to students' skills, is it enough? Is it sufficient to ensure that students achieve learning outcomes and they stay engaged? So the answer is no, it's not enough, because there are also emotions, and this is a huge part in the field of learning that we frequently forget about actually the critical role emotions play in how we engage in learning. We know that there is this optimal arousal level, right? What contributes to the arousal level when we are excited to learn, when we are engaged, right? What are some of the factors, maybe you can share in chat, help you be excited about what you are learning right now? Curiosity. Yes, very nice. Exactly. Connection, interest. So interest, connection, relevance, you see the value. Exactly. So all of this are important aspects of having emotions that appraise the task as valuable to you. Feeling capable, exactly. And that is not necessarily about the skills you have, but even feeling capable. Thank you, Vanessa. This is great. It's about self-efficacy, right? Do I believe that I can do this? That's different from I can be skilled, but let's say that I had a previously poor experience with this skill, or my previous instructor told me that, you know, I'm a failure or something like this, right? Will I feel will I have the self-efficacy to engage in this? So this is another important aspect of being engaged. Do we know all of these aspects about our students? We have a class of, let's say, 30 students. Do we know their skills? Do we know their emotions, their backgrounds? Frequently, we actually do not know, which means that it might be quite difficult to create those level appropriate, emotionally engaging tasks. So I'm going to finalize this part with a very useful framework, which is called 5 Conditions for an Engaged Learner. Which helps think about what questions do I need to ask students when I plan the course, when I plan the task, when I plan the assignment. So the first one is the consequences. What is the value of the task to students? Do they actually see the value? Sometimes students don't see the value. So which means that we have to share what that value is. We need to inform students about this. Do students possess the necessary skills to perform the task independently or not? How do you know this? We need to collect some information about this. Do students have control and choice over how to execute the task? Do you give them this choice, or it's only, you know, some one option and there is no choice? How do students build confidence with me and through the task, through the course assignments? And finally, do students feel connected and supported to share and engage in the course? So this framework helps think about each of the experiences and the questions that you need to ask at the beginning, in the middle, or at the end of the course to assess whether or not the task that you give to them is level appropriate. So now we're gonna move on to the next session, and we're gonna talk about what we already know about NYU Shanghai students that will kind of help us make informed decisions and question some of the teaching methods that we use. Okay, so I will be using the information from the surveys from the academic year 2023-2024. The new updates will be made close to week 0. So those, if you want to have the fresh information, it will be available close to the beginning of the September. But based on my understanding or looking at the past 3 years, the data is very similar. So I think that this is valid to make informed decisions about potential challenges and potential consequences about NYU Shanghai community. So what do we know? We know that our students come from various backgrounds. We don't have students who come only from China or only from the United States. We have 50%, around roughly 50% from China. We have about 1/4 from the United States. And then it's all over the place. In 23-24, the next populous country was Mongolia, then Pakistan, Kazakhstan, and then overall 41 other countries represented, speaking 16 different languages. So how diverse are your students and how diverse are their starting points? Very, because where you come from, what educational system you come from defines your expectations, your teaching or your learning habits, knowledge, skills, everything, academic norms, and so on and so forth. So let's look at actually the high school, what kind of high schools our students come from. So, well, it's logical to kind of see why many students would come from Chinese Gaokao. Actually, a bit more students coming from Chinese Gaokao than the percent. That's a distortion because this is a sample for the survey, as opposed to the previous graph was the analysis of the whole student body. So then we have 1/4 coming from international baccalaureate, A levels, and then smaller percent from various state systems, for example, the Russian state system, the Kazakh state system, the French state system, and so on and so forth. Okay. So we were interested to actually learn about how high school curriculum impacts students' experiences in the classroom. And last year we ran a survey and we asked students about what are some of the classroom experiences that they have received in high school. And we asked those questions based on, what we want our students to do in the class. So here are the results. In terms of students' exposure to high classroom experiences by the type of curriculum. So you can see here, blue is IB A level, so a more international. Chinese Gaokao is pink, and then purple state and others. Okay, so what do we see here? We frequently expect our students to participate in group work. It's just an expectation. Come and work in groups, okay? And we see here, for example, that students who have been exposed to IB, they have had more of such experience, so they are more used to this. Students coming from other educational system may not have had such an experience. What do you do as an instructor? So let's say that you are planning a group final project at the end of the course. And, you just give this group project and that's it. And you learn at the beginning of your course that your students received or were exposed to various group experiences. What is your response? How do we make sure that every single student participating in group project will actually achieve the learning outcomes and will feel engaged, safe, and confident? So what are some of the examples of what you can do? Exactly. So trying to make sure all students understand the format, ease into group work through the semester. Okay, so scaffold the group work. So you can integrate various aspects of group work where students recognize cultural differences in work styles, right, in communication. Add more structure like roles, exactly, right. So basically what you are suggesting, you will scaffold and you will use maybe smaller tasks during the semester to prepare students and to align and to teach them how to interact in groups, how to assign roles, how to think about deadlines, because people from different cultures have completely different attitude towards deadlines. For some, deadlines mean nothing. And so when you work as a group, that might be a problem. Okay, so this is one example, great. So then we also see a huge difference in students' experience with citations. So we have many courses that don't really teach citations. And we just expect students to do this, something that is just given, right? So we see that students from IB, more A levels, they have a significant experience with that, while others have very limited experience. So how do we respond to this? What do we do? Actually, Vanessa, who's here today, she and Caitlin will have a workshop on that aspect, and I highly recommend you to attend, so I will not focus on this aspect as much today. But obviously, when you know this background, you can adjust and adapt, and you can collaborate with colleagues from different departments to address this. So then also, we have, let's say that undertook research using diverse sources beyond teacher-assigned materials. That also goes to Vanessa's topic. So I'm not going to talk about this much, but you see that if you have a research project and you expect students to work with diverse sources, and if you don't kind of teach or provide additional support, students who haven't had such an experience, they may feel they don't have the skills, so they don't feel confidence. They need additional support. Okay, I'm gonna move on to the next. Here, there are some strategies that I suggest, but you can review this later when we share slides. So let's move to the next one. What is students' high school experience with assessments methods? And again, we try to include in the survey various assessment methods used by our faculty, right? So here we can see most of them, not most of them, but many of them represented. So the first one is actually we ask students to write essays, right? And again, we see that some of the students are very used to doing so, while others haven't done essays. And I mean, if we think about essays, we would have to think about academic essays in the actually US format, right? Because this is what we, the standards we adhere, right, here at NYU Shanghai. Then we can see that students have various experience with working independently or on self-directed projects. So some of the state educational systems like Chinese Gaokao and, for example, I come from the Russian system and can confirm Kazakh and others. Those are the systems which are very directed. So when you give students freedom to do whatever, go ahead and plan your project, then they might experience problems because we haven't done this before, right? We need more assistance in this. We need more scaffolding. So if the project is given just, you know, one task and go ahead and work on it over the semester, something that we may end up actually is that you miss the deadlines, you don't know how to plan, and so on and so forth. So what kind of support do we need to provide to students? I mean, there are many things that you can do, right, to do this, but the most important thing is that you actually, when you know the differences, you know how to adjust. So we also observe differences in, yeah, like engaging with peer feedback and things like this. Okay, so then another interesting was top sources for high school research. So here students could select all the sources. These are the numbers of students who responded that way. And they could select multiple sources, right? So we see that students, very similar situation that many students have used Google to do research, right? And then you come to a course and you expect them to work with databases and to evaluate the validity of sources and things like this. Some courses focus on teaching this, while some other courses expect that there was that course before me that actually helped them acquire the skills. Okay, this is something, again, to be reviewed, and if your course includes a research component, it's important to understand what background your student bring with them in terms of working with sources and working with databases. And again, the libraries workshop will talk in more details about this and how you can collaborate and support this. Okay, let's move on to the next fun part, which is linguistic backgrounds. So the fact that our students come from so many different countries, speaking 16 at least from that one cohort different languages, means that their native language is different. It's not English. So we have 84% of students from the Gaokao system. No, not because some of the Chinese students go to or attend international divisions of Chinese high schools, and so they might be following IB or A levels. Some students attend international schools, and so they, but the majority do come from the Chinese Gaokao. So, okay, going back to the linguistic background. So in terms of the language, so we have 84% of students who speak English as a second language. That's a lot. And another important thing is, yeah, you can be a second language learner and speak excellent English, no problem, right? But it's important to understand, is it the language that will allow you to be effective in an academic environment? So we asked the question about whether or not students received any prior academic English training, right? So do you know the academic English conventions? Do you know how the texts are structured? Do you know how to write that essay with a thesis statement, with the introductory topic sentences and things like this? And we see that almost 82% haven't had such training, which means that for example, first-year students, this is something that they will be learning from scratch, because languages, they differ in the way they organize thoughts. They differ in the way we write essays. The way I write essay in my native language is completely different from the way I write essays in English. The way we write essays in Chinese is different from the way we organize that in English. So that's important to keep in mind. So if students haven't had explicit training in academic English, then they might be challenged. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So here I would like to show you the link. Obviously, when our students who speak English as a second language enter NYU Shanghai, right, they have to take the tests that assesses their linguistic abilities, and all of these tests assess all the separately writing, speaking, listening, and reading. So I'm not sure how familiar you are here with the notation. So C2 is an advanced level. It's advanced, but not proficient. B2 is an intermediate level. So if you speak any other language and you have, achieved the intermediate level, so that's B2. Everything that comes below is obviously below. So here we see, I think an important point or important takeaway from here is that productive skills, which are writing and speaking, right? And it's not a surprise. This is something that takes more time to develop it because it takes more practice, and students have less productive practice in high schools usually. So writing, you can see like this bell curve, which is skewed more towards B2, and then the listening again. The speaking, right? So we see that the majority falls within B2. But we expect, by giving them the content, by engaging students in classroom discussions, we basically assume frequently that they are proficient, right? Which is not necessarily the case. Students might be challenged with understanding, with writing, especially having no conventions or prior training and things like this. So this is something that is important to acknowledge and keep in mind as we go. Okay, I'm gonna skip this and move on to another aspect of how students expect to be taught, right? So sometimes we all have our own teaching styles, but are they necessarily effective, right? That's a good question to think. Are this the styles that help us achieve the learning outcomes based on where our students come from? So the majority of students actually appreciate hands-on engagement in tasks. They don't want to listen and to be lectured. They want to do things practically. And another point that I want to talk about from the surveys, which is important, is, again, NYU Shanghai is highly diverse. It's the beauty of this community, but also might be a challenge. And it poses it requires a lot of work with integrating students in this cross-cultural community, right? So again, based on the first year survey, we see that students come from different countries, they speak different languages, and we see that 65% of them haven't had study abroad experience abroad, right? So they have limited exposure to different cultures. They have limited exposure to cross-cultural skill training even. They may not even know what that is. And from those who did have some experience, most of that experience was very short-term, like travel experience abroad. So what does that all mean? It means that, let me just move on to the next one. So there's this great tool called Hofstede Insights Monitor, where you can select countries of interest and see how different they are on various aspects. For example, power distance, individualism, motivation, and so on and so forth. So I took the top 4 that I showed you: China, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, and the United States. And you see, I don't think we should completely use this to make any judgment, but at least it can hint us into what could be the differences in the way students interact. For example, the power distance might have an implication towards how we view instructors and how we are able to engage with them. So if there is a high power distance, as it is in Mongolia, right? Will I challenge my faculty right? Or will I disagree with them? Will I even ask questions in class? Because there are certain norms that are attached to this aspect, and so on and so forth. So this means that the more diverse the class is, the higher the variation in the way students interact, student-faculty communication, classroom engagement. For example, is it acceptable for me to actually share my opinion in class? And what do I think about it? If previously people were scolded for sharing their opinion, like it is in some educational system, will I feel as comfortable doing this, even if I'm invited to do so, right? So my question to you, I mean, we all work with diverse classrooms. So what are some of the ways that helped you actually address this diversity and help students integrate and share the norms of NYU Shanghai community, where we appreciate diversity, where we make students engage and things like this? So what are some of the useful tools that you have used in your classrooms? Yeah, there could be, I mean, there are many things that you can do. Even what I have done with you at the beginning, just looking at the photo, right, and asking about emotions and what drives this emotions, right? You can have like a 15-minute conversation with your students about group work and what are some of the cultural expectations that they have from group work. So this will help identify differences and think about how students can align them. But cross-cultural training and cross-cultural communication, given the diversity we have, should be an important component, regardless of the course that you teach. Okay, and finally, I think that's another important aspect. You all said that to feel emotionally engaged in the content, it's important that you see value, right? You see relevance. So this one is more appropriate for the course level engagement, not necessarily for the task. So there was a question about, in general, when I think about my goals for college, I focus on, what do I focus on? Actually, students are interested, they're very pragmatic these days. I think, I mean, we are probably all pragmatic in that regard. So students are interested in their future jobs and career opportunities. Around 60% of our students are actually continuing with the graduate programs. So for them, this is an important aspect. So they need to see how this is related to their future programs, to their future career opportunities. And there was always an issue of grades. Why students are so focused on grades? Well, because if you apply to a graduate program, people, you know, the admissions will look at your GPA. And if you want to get a scholarship, they will be looking at your GPA. And hence, there is so much focus on all of this grades and so much anxiety about it. Okay. Any questions about this section? And I mean, there are many things. I have highlighted the key things that are very obvious from the surveys and which apply to all of this. Depending on what you teach or depending on the workshop that you hold, right? You may want to look at additional aspects of that and think about how that will impact student learning and achievement of the outcomes. So I'm going to move to question 3, and I think I have just the right time to do so. How can you learn about your students? So we have the survey results, and the CTL has a lot of insights about that. So if you are interested, you are welcome to talk to me and look at these results. But obviously, to make it more tailored towards your course, you need to design such, use the tools and think about what information you want to learn about your students. And this is an iterative process which begins at the beginning of your course, right? So when I ask you a question about at what time do we actually learn about our students, we should be doing this either, well, before. Some faculty do this before. Some choose to do this at the beginning of the course. Then we, based on this stage, we anticipate what could be the challenges. For example, I identified group work might be a challenge, language might be a challenge, research might be a challenge, cross-cultural aspect in group work might be a challenge, right? Time management, if I give a self-directed project, might be a challenge, and so on. So I make predictions about challenges, and I think about what teaching methods I adopt. So then during the course, I actually tested. I observed how students engage, and at the end, I make the final assessment and I decide if I teach this next year, how do I improve? So let's see what you can do at each of these stages. Pre-course surveys, right, where you identify you know what are some of the fundamental skills based on the teaching methods that you are planning to adopt, the skills and knowledge that you expect students to have, and you can assess them. It could be anonymous. You don't need students to kind of highlight this. You can do it before any workshop that you teach. You can do it you can use diagnostic tests. For example, for some of the STEM courses, diagnostic tests are very useful because it can highlight to students what are some of the challenges or some of the gaps in knowledge that they have, and then you can suggest what can you do to catch up or to review, or what are some of the additional resources available on campus at the ARC, and so on and so forth. You can use a variety of introductory discussions or icebreakers. I used one today to show how it could be light and anonymous and still give a lot of information. And it could, if we had more time, it could lead further to the discussion. So then during the course, we, based on the first stage, we predict, we design. Then I want to assess. So here we would use low-stake assessments, and which you don't want to grade this. You are using this to monitor your teaching. Am I teaching in the way that makes students understand, right? What are some of the gaps in knowledge that they still have? Where do I need to spend a little bit more time or do a bit more review? I mean, there are some courses that don't do any assessments up to midterm. How then can you know about if your students are achieving your learning outcomes, and what information can you use to actually adjust? You have no data for that, right? So it's kind of impossible. It would be all intuitive. So then we can do mid-semester pulse checks. So those could focus on emotions. How do students feel about being in the course, the workload, what are some of their challenges, and so on. Another thing that was, I think Ilov is here, and he has used this in one of his courses where based on the initial self-assessment, where students so basically the concept is students do the self-assessment at the beginning. They then define what might be the challenges for them, and they set goals, like what do I want to work on? And then you integrate reflection on that in the course design. It's not, it might be a part of the participation grade or something like this, but it helps students stay engaged and focused on their challenges and feel accomplished. Obviously, one-on-one meetings and also the diagnostic tests. And at the end, I mean, we all do the course evaluation. Students send us feedback, but there is a certain format. You can always adapt your own evaluation and give it to students to check what you want to learn. Let's say that you have experimented this semester with a group work, right? You have integrated cross-cultural component into the group work. You have scaffolded different assignments to prep students for effective group work. And then at the end, this is something that I want more feedback on from students, because I will use this to then design my new course. Okay. So basically, this system allows for continuous evaluation of student progress. And for faculty, it's important to students because they know, what is expected from them, what they can work on, and what additional support there is. For you, it gives you a chance to tailor instructions and teaching strategies early on without waiting until the end. It gives you information how to design activities and assignments, and it allows you evidence or data to provide timely interventions and support, either through your personal support or through collaboration with other offices like the Center for Teaching and Learning, like the library, the Academic Resource Center. And I don't have much time left. Here I have a variety of how basically to design everything that we have just talked about. I will not spend too much time on this. It's quite straightforward. And I always suggest a framework to use this, several steps. And those are highly adaptable to a course, a task, an assignment, a workshop that you teach. So you always start with defining your learning outcomes and teaching and learning methods that you're going to use, right? Then, speaking of students, we need to think about what skills I want them to have, or what skills they must have to complete this independently. So skills and knowledge. But not only that, we frequently forget that it's not only about the course-specific skills and knowledge. There are many other actually skills that we want students to have. We want them to use Brightspace. We want them to communicate well. We want them to do public speaking and debating and blah, 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 right? So depending on the teaching methods and the kind of anticipated tasks, it's important to think about what are those skills that you want them to also have. Then assessing relevant and prior experience and attitudes towards this. So experience is important, but attitude is more important. If you ask students about the group work, the majority of them actually hate group work because it wasn't designed well, right? Or, I mean, there are many other things. So many students prefer to work independently because they can better manage time. So you can learn about this, and you can learn about why was the group work a negative experience, what contributed to it, and you can focus on those aspects because group work could be fun and students would have to do this at their work, right? We might as well scaffold that into the design. And also assess expectations and goals. Why are students taking your course? Why are they here for this workshop? What are their goals? And things like this. So with these steps, you can easily design course surveys and self-assessments. And now you can use even ChatGPT to do this extremely well. And this is the prompt that will basically ChatGPT will work with you as a conversational agent that will ask you, basically will interview you about the course, like what are the learning outcomes, what are some of the methods that you're planning to teach, and then it will, because we give it a framework, it will ask you also to think about and reflect on skills, soft skills, technical, transferable skills, and then it will suggest you some of the questions that you may want to use. So it's very nice, and it kind of makes this whole thing more interactive and very quick. It can then also analyze the data that you have because it's anonymized. It will help you. We will have a workshop, separate workshop on that, so I'm not going to go into the details on this. Student introductions that could be done at the beginning of the course, depending on what is that you wanted them to do. Anonymous polling, exploration questions. You can do group work image prompt polling, for example. I mean, because group work was such a problem and is such a problem frequently, that's why I'm using this example today. So you can, at the beginning of the course, knowing that your course actually, it builds on group work, you can learn more about it through a very interactive exercise where students share and learn, and they make conclusions about what could be adjusted and how. So there's also how to design goal setting and reflections. For that, we have many courses that do this, where students keep reflection journals on their learnings, and they set goals to themselves. There could be also pulse checks, and this is a great tool to make adjustments mid-semester. And you can focus on many different things during the pulse checks. And it's different from the mid-semester student feedback, right? Here you can have much more control and flexibility. And there are evaluation of your teaching strategies. What is that students don't like that you do, what you should start doing, and what you should continue doing. For specific tasks, I mean, sometimes we hold a course, but do we actually evaluate what is the outcome of that? We hold a lesson, but do we evaluate what is the outcome of the lesson. Have students achieved the learning outcomes? Have they learned what they are supposed to? So there are ways to do so when at the end students share, or it could be on a piece of paper where they write what they have learned, what they are still wondering about, and sometimes you can learn about where you need to spend a bit more time on that. Skipped some of the slides, but those will be shared. You can review this in details. Once again, knowing your student is essential if you want students to achieve the learning outcomes, especially in such a diverse community as NYU Shanghai. And for that, you need to start with your learning outcomes and then work backwards, but towards the student to learn what skills and knowledge they bring into what you expect them to do. And this will help you identify the gaps. And once that is identified, then it's easier to think about what are some of the teaching methods that I can choose, or come to the CTL and we will think about how we can adjust to that.